Hey, it's me, Rob Ryan. I am back with another wonderful conversation with an incredibly bright, talented, really widely talented entrepreneurial thinker, Jocelyn Ramirez. And we talk about maybe one of the most fundamental things to us as human beings: food, how we make it, how we consume it, what it means to our lives, how it ties to our culture, how it binds our families together, how it can determine the health and or wealth of our life path, how healthy and or not we might be. Food, it's rooted in everything we do. It touches every part of our lives. And yes, it is also a huge business. It is a massive global industry. And Jocelyn is a piece and a part of all of this. She is an author. She is a New York Times recipe contributor. She is a chef. She is a CPG, consumer packaged goods food brand company founder and entrepreneur who has her products Todo Verde on the shelves at renowned grocery chains like Erewhon, Sprouts, Bristol Farms, hoping to get into some other big ones coming up soon. So we have an incredible conversation about how we all can think differently, more entrepreneurially, I would say, about food in our lives and in our businesses. So I hope you enjoy this episode as much as she and I did making it for you.
We are so grateful to be supported by these community champions: Sales MD, Team Friday, Realist Lab, Kiana Patterson, Diego Chavez, Jared Boucher, Heather Ryder, Janine Sua, Lily Roca, and Steve Kernan.
Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back, or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And as you know, if you're a listener or a follower, this is a show where I get not have to. I get to have weekly conversations with some of the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across all sectors and segments of society and industry as we come together to try to leave this world a little bit better than we found it. And today, I'm super excited for a whole bunch of reasons, but I'm really excited and honored, frankly, to be joined by Jocelyn Ramirez, who's the founder of food company. I don't know what we call these CPG brands, these cool products, but Todo Verde. But Todo Verde is only one part of her story. So let me tell you a little bit more about her before we meet her. Jocelyn is literally rewriting the recipe for cultural foodways for one plant-powered dish at a time. She is an author, she's a chef, she is a food company founder, as I said, and after leaving her career in higher education, she's created one of LA's most buzzworthy plant-based Mexican food brands. She is the culinary and commercial alchemist behind Todo Verde. But she's more than that. She's a loving partner, she's a New York Times recipe contributor, she's a published author, a practicing yogi, freelance consultant, and a fierce advocate for food justice for our community in Los Angeles and beyond. Her seasoning blends are shaking up store shelves, and her presence is igniting change in kitchens and communities alike. Jocelyn's background includes a degree in fine art, design, and business, and she's also trained at the Matthew Kenny Culinary Institute and Yogi Hari's Ashram. She currently sits on the Culinary Advisory Board for Food Forward and the Leadership Board for the Los Angeles Food Policy Council. So please welcome the brilliant, and dare I say, it's my show, so I get to have colorful introductions, the bold and flavorful Jocelyn Ramirez. Jocelyn, welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you so much for that introduction. You are a legit hype man.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah.
I will gratefully accept that role for the rest of my life. I'm not going to lie. I'll tell you little secret that the listeners can enjoy. I toggled as I was writing that script. I toggled between bold and flavorful or bold and spicy. So I don't could have gone either way today, but super grateful to have you here.
Thank you.
We were recounting before the show started that we had the good pleasure to meet a couple of years ago at a food industry. What was that show called?
Expo West. It's the big one.
It's the food industry trade show, like in the world. And it's this big, huge thing here in Southern California. It's in Anaheim, which is just a little bit south of us here in Los Angeles. And great pleasure, joy for me. And one of the benefits of this amazing community of you're about to now become an alumni of the show, not just a guest. We call you all alumni. And that is because what happened that night 2 summers ago is what happens all the time once you're a part of this community, which is a former guest of the show, alumni and friend, Kiana Patterson, who's a very active and amazing investor and catalyst for change here in Los Angeles' entrepreneurial economy. She texted me and she was like, wait, you're at Expo West. I saw something you posted online. I was like, yeah, I'm here with these guys from Mexico, my former client. They're a venture capital firm in traditional mainstream venture tech stuff, but now they're getting into food. And she's like, oh my God, okay, there's these two young people that are like incredible food entrepreneurs that I love that are from LA. You've got to meet them. I'm going to like tell them to come find you. And I was like, do it. Awesome. This will be great. And it was you who walked up to me and was like, I think you're you. I think I think we're supposed to meet each other. There's a picture of you from Kiana.
Yeah,
Right.
I think she had sent me your LinkedIn account. I looked at your profile picture and then I was scanning the room. Who is this person? Where are they?
Right. Like,
Walked over
where's this
and was
weird
like,
big,
I'm supposed to meet you. Do you know
yeah,
Kiana Patterson?
it was
And
amazing.
yeah,
Amazing.
she
You
is
and,
so awesome. Such a great connector.
oh,
Uh, and I love that she's bringing folks together that are not only uh, really curious about food in the ways that we are, but then is also thinking about our foundation, our values. How do we align in that way? So it's beyond food.
it is all very much beyond food, as is this show. The show is beyond just a podcast about entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial thinking. And frankly, it is really foundationally tied to exactly what you said, values alignment. And so I think we're going to hear a lot of that through the conversation today. So I've got one big question just to kind of kick us off here. How do we, maybe we don't, you can tell us, how do we all think about food differently today than say how we thought about it 20 or 30 years ago?
That's a great question. My perspective thinking about it 20 to 30 years ago, growing up as a latchkey kid, I mean, my parents immigrated here from Mexico and Ecuador, and they worked full-time jobs, a lot of times overtime. And although they had grown up eating pretty homemade, basic staples, my upbringing relied a lot on processed foods, on cup of noodles, canned tuna. I'm coming home from school, picking up, a pack of cookies or something really simple, microwavable meals. So I grew up in an era where my parents were trying to assimilate and saw everybody doing that and thought that that was kind of the new era of eating. And so that was readily available in our household. Lots of fast food chains in our neighborhood. So thankfully, we leaned more on the healthier side of the fast food chain, which was like El Pollo Loco and Subway. Um,
Hey,
but
good shout out to El
yeah,
Pollo.
yeah.
That's one of my favorites.
But I mean that when I think about food, I think about my grandmother's generation and that we would go to her house and we didn't see those processed foods. She was literally cooking things from scratch for us whenever we came to visit. But then my parents' generation, because they were working so much outside of the household, it just created a different dynamic. And so now I'm kind of seeing a comeback to that ancestral knowledge or that information that my grandparents saw and that people are starting to want to eat more real foods. They're starting to really see the negative impacts that our health has had based off of these, you know, pretty much heavily processed foods that are causing so many preventable health issues. So in my family, I've seen everything from cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, thyroid issues, just to name a few. And this is so starkly, part of a Black and brown communities. Like we just see it so much more in Black and brown communities. And part of it is that like so much eating of fast food, so much accessibility to the packaged processed foods, and not enough time. And this is for different reasons. Like it's obviously like an intersectional kind of layering of reasons. For in my case, my parents were working so many hours. So people are just trying to do the best that they can within those means.
Yeah.
Um,
And
but it's
in some context, like they were at least they were being responsible and they were having food readily available for
exactly.
you when you came home after school to take care of yourself until someone came home from work.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So they were trying to make sure that they were providers, right? But not necessarily super knowledgeable on what the impacts of those foods would kind of create down the line. So it's interesting to see now where we are. Just the fact that I am learning more about these ancestral foods and practices, both from a very cultural perspective. Like I said, I'm Mexican Ecuadorian. I have more food knowledge more on the Mexican side, my mother's side or my maternal side. So really, I've been leaning on that information. But then I've also learned a lot from Ayurveda, which is like an Indian perspective to food as medicine. And I've been trying to uh, apply that information to my, with my family. So my mom's been dealing with some health issues as of lately, and we've been kind of looking at from a different lens now. And it's cool to see that we're kind of it's going through like a revival.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Haney and Company. We all know that in today's complex financial landscape, having a trusted advisor can make all the difference. Since 1960, Haney and Company has been providing comprehensive accounting services to a diverse range of clients, from small businesses to large corporations. With nearly 400 professionals across 13 locations, they offer services in tax, audit, business consulting, and client advisory. In fact, their commitment to excellence has earned them recognition from Accounting Today and Forbes magazines. At Haney and Company, though, it's not just about balancing books. It's about building lasting relationships based on trust and mutual growth. So visit HaneyCPAs.com. That's HaneyCPAs.com to learn how they can support your business's financial journey. You just segued me into my next question.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Right. But I'll frame it slightly differently. Right. So I've got some good friends, Shana Harris and here in LA, Nora Mae Cadena behind Supply Chain Capital, which is in of themselves in their world of venture capital. They are innovating the way that capital gets deployed and who capital gets deployed to. Frankly, they're just innovative in the fact that they are two women of varying ethnic backgrounds. As we know, Nora Mae, proud Mexicana from Colima, right? And they have been telling me for years since they got together and launched their fund, right, that it was like this target date, like 2045, right? And like 2045 was not only when we were going to see this demographic shift kind of make itself permanent in the United States as far as the demography of our country, but also that like their goals tied to that was that they used to say like they wanted to eliminate the ethnic food aisle from the grocery store, right? Because by then they essentially wanted it to be just the grocery store. Like all foods are here, right? So all aisles are ethnic food aisles in some sense or not, right? And so I've had that in my brain since they launched their fund. I was kind of helped her early on ideate a lot of what she was doing, right? And so I had kind of a nice, fun insider's perspective to just watch her go from where she was to what she created from scratch. And so I've always watched, and like, I'm a weird guy in American culture in that I've lived so much time in Latin America over the last 10 years that I grocery shop like a European, right? Not like an American. So I haven't been to Costco except to go like with my daughter. Like I haven't been to Costco in forever unless I'm visiting my sister down in Orange County and she's like, we got to go to Costco. I'm like, all right, let me get a hot dog. Right. Like, but I walk in my neighborhood here in Hollywood and I walk to my Ralph's and I get kind of what I need for like the day or the next day. Right. And so my refrigerator, like in American context, always looks empty. Right. But it ties back to this. Like it seems like a broadening of it when I'm in the grocery store. So I'm curious from you who is inside this world of food from so many different perspectives, like, are we actually experiencing kind of this like flavorful shift? You seem to indicate in your opening comments that we are experiencing a shift back towards healthier alternatives and maybe a deeper understanding of our food. Are we also seeing kind of like diverse cultural foods becoming more, and I hate this word, but like mainstream?
I think that we really are, and it's a slow and steady process. When I walk down grocery store shelves or aisles, I am starting to see more things sprinkled in that are very regional, very nuanced, that are different than we would have seen, just even 2 to 5 years ago, which is really great. But there's still so much work to be done. Part of the pitch that I do to retailers whenever I'm doing a presentation is I show this image of an aisle that is essentially half an aisle of just red tomato sauce. And then you go and you look at the ethnic or Mexican, Latin, I'll just say Latin section, and it's just one sliver of an aisle, right? And Italian food is also, a quote unquote ethnic food, if you
Right.
really think about it. And they have just so much real estate. And you could say the same in terms of regionality and types of diverse flavors across Latin America. Like we deserve the same type of real estate. And, if they look at their shoppers and they're starting to see the demographics within their shoppers, they should be offering more options that make sense. One of the things that I also share in my pitches with retailers is that since I believe 2011, tortillas have outsold hamburger and hot dog buns across America.
So you have
So
the last part is the key statement, right? Across the entire country, right?
across the
Not
entire
not just
country.
here in Southern California where you and I happen to both be, where I mean we're basically in old Mexico, right? Like
Yeah,
respectfully, that's cool. But across the entire country. Uh-huh.
exactly. So, people are enjoying their Taco Tuesdays. And it's just a matter of retailers tapping in. And one of the things that I will say, just being in this food retail space, is the majority of buyers are white men. So it's a matter of educating folks on the fact that, spicy and mild taco seasoning isn't true to culture in any way, that we do eat actual flavors that represent different areas of Mexico and Latin America. So it's a lot of education, a lot of kind of folks diminishing the ego and realizing, oh, I should be more thoughtful in my process of what I would like to carry. I should support people of lived experiences within those cultures as I do, bring in new vendors into my space. So there's a lot of work to be done. I continue to try to chip away at it, but I don't know what else to do to really push the needle forward.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah.
and also I can imagine part of it is you're pitching, you're not pitching like the social thesis, you're pitching your product. Right. And
Exactly.
so there's got to be this, it feels like I can hear it in your voice. There's like a natural tension that
Yeah.
exists between like, I'm trying to advocate for like the bigger truth while I'm
Hmm.
also trying to get, George, the buyer who looks and sounds much more like me than he does like you. Right. I'm trying to get John Smith, the buyer, to also place my Todo Verde products in more favorable places in the store, right? And it's
Yeah.
funny. I love because I honestly, I've never thought about this, but the way you draw, that's a great story analogy, right? To draw this comparison between like that whole aisle of sauces is basically quote unquote Italian food, right? And then this little sliver of this one section, this one aisle is
Hmm.
Mexican or Latin Spanish food, right? And like, that's nonsense. I mean, like
It's
Italians were the
crazy.
immigrants, right? And like way back when. But also, right, by placement of that, then that person who's looking for, and I think of my daughter in this case, 31-year-old, half Mexicana, half gringa, right? And her partner loves to cook. So she buys the stuff, he loves to cook, right? And she was just telling me the story. It's about Italian sauce, like where she was like, oh, we tried a different sauce, Dad, and it's in the cabinets. So when you're there watching the dogs and we're traveling, like if you want to try this different sauce, I hope, tell me if you like it or not, right? And I'm like, okay, but now I'm tying all this together in your analogy, and I'm thinking to myself, like, she's standing there in the store, and
Looking
she's
at hundreds of bottles
right,
of
and then
tomato
kind of
sauce.
experimenting and trying different stuff. Whereas if we gave her, and she may be a bad example in this context, but if we gave the average consumer 100 choices of taco seasonings
Salsa,
or
taco
salsa or
seasoning,
whatever it might
mole.
be, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they would experiment and express an interest in different things. But
Hmm.
because we narrow it down, and first of all, it's out of sight, out of mind. So like if they don't go to that aisle looking for it, right? Then when it is there in front of them, it's still less choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Seems,
lots of work to be done.
yeah, no,
And so
clearly.
it's an educational kind of experiment between the retailer and also the consumer, because obviously the retailer is going based off of what they think the consumer is going to end up purchasing. So it's just a matter of investing that time and energy into the final consumer, making sure that they fully understand how they can use the product, how your daughter would implement, todo verde seasoning into her regular routine.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Which she
work
will,
to
by
be
the way.
done.
Now, after
Yeah.
this episode, she sure will. I'll tell you, I'll promise you that much. I'll get you at least one customer.
Yeah. I
But
love it.
okay. So we're going to toggle back and forth between talking about you and talking about food. And so I want to kind of open that door a little bit if we can, right? So I see you. We have a lot of people in common here in town that kind of cross over well beyond food. We met each other in the context of that great story from Kiana at Expo West at Food Mecca. And that is a large part of why I wanted to have you on the show to explore that. But I also know you stand for, and you can hear it in your answers already, you stand for so much more, right? And so you have a really passionate voice for many things, not just food. You have passion for community advocacy, for social justice. And to me, it feels like they all emanate from either the same place inside you or from a similar place inside you. So I want to put the mirror in front of you. Like, how do you describe the complexity and the passions that you have for advocacy in the broadest sense? How do you describe yourself?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like food access and food justice advocacy, I think it all really stemmed from um, back when I was a college professor, teaching civic engagement, leadership for community building. A lot of the stuff that we talked about were really honing in or tapping into like how we can use our individual or in collective power to make a difference, to make an impact in the lives of others. And one thing that I've always been passionate about is food. It was always the hobby. It was the thing that I was excited to do when I went to go visit my grandmother, was cook with her, write down the recipes, understand the why. The first time she cooked things, it's just been something that I've always been really fascinated by because it's a way that my family has shown love. We're a family who doesn't always, we're not super affectionate. We won't say, I love you super often, but that favorite dish prepared for just out of nowhere, no reason, that's the I love you. And so I think that's why I'm so connected with it, because that's the way that we showed love in my family. And to think so many people who would want that can't even access it because it's not available in their neighborhoods, because they can't afford it, because there's no grocery store that has those particular types of ingredients. It's so many layers of reasons why somebody might not be able to access something, or they are working two jobs and they simply don't have the time or energy to cook it from scratch. And so, I really started to kind of take a step in that direction. Why is that? Is there anything that I can do to help play a role in making a positive shift? Is it education, which I tried to do, like also trying to help folks understand more or learn more plant-based Mexican recipes that are still culturally relevant, and helping to kind of sway some of the negative health impacts that we've seen in Black and Brown communities. In my family alone, all the health issues from diabetes to cancer to XYZ, that made me make a shift within my immediate family and saw the difference, and then really wanted to then go out and see if I can be supportive in any way to other people's
Yeah.
families.
I need to move in with you guys. Help me live longer.
Yeah.
Now that I'm an abuelo,
Oh,
as of
congrats.
7 months ago, now my daughter wants me to live to be like 100, right?
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
like, all right, I got some work to do then.
You got to
So
reverse the aging process
yes,
now.
yes. We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Chisos Capital. Everyone knows that raising capital is hard. And frankly, finding the next pool of entrepreneurs to get access to as limited investors is sometimes impossible too. Do you have a big idea, a dream you're building, but you're struggling to find early funding? Well, Chisos is changing the game for founders, creators, athletes, and investors. Whether you're launching a startup, growing your creative brand, or training for the big leagues, Chisos backs you. Chisos uniquely invests up to $100,000 in people, not just products, whether they be entrepreneurs, creators, or even athletes. With their unique CISA model, convertible income share agreements, founders get flexible funding without giving up equity or ownership, and investors get attractive returns and great upside with less risk. Chisos works for both investors and the people bringing our world to life. If you're seeking access to a truly diverse pool of deals, or you're someone who feels overlooked by the VC game, Chisos is ready to back you. So apply now at chisos.io. So I'm also much more conscious of it than my parents were, for sure.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and I'm
Yeah.
in your context of your earlier answers, like I'm a byproduct of a world of processed food and the processed stuff that you'd buy from the grocery store and shove it in the extra house or the extra kitchen, the extra freezer,
Hmm.
the extra refrigerator that we had in our house. Because I was born and lived in the 70s and 80s, right? I mean, so like that was just middle America, and that's just what you did.
That's what you did.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
my mom, God bless her, she always made meals for us, but no one would have ever, including her, described her as a cook, like or like as being a food person. Like she made food because that's what a woman's role was at that time in society, and she was great at it, right? But it wasn't
Yes.
necessarily great food, it was just food, right? We were fed and we were well fed, but we weren't necessarily like well fed in the healthy sense.
Hmm.
Right. We
Hmm.
had access to food because we were privileged, and we had opportunity, and that was great. But yeah, very, very different. And help people understand, right? I mean, Los Angeles is a massive city, much bigger than most people. The metro region, much bigger than most people think, right? It's 14, 16, 18 million people, depending on how you count it. And help us understand why, and you tipped at it a little bit at the end of that answer, right? The diversity of our community, the range
Yeah.
of ethnicities in our community, the range of economic inequality or equality in our community. So talk about why like access to healthy food is critical, and maybe start from the point of view of reminding people that not everybody has like a fully stocked, robust, healthy option grocery store in their neighborhood. Because I think to a lot of people in the
Exactly.
world, like that seems crazy that there are entire neighborhoods or areas of our city in the modern world in 2025 where they don't have like walkable or even like easily quick drivable access to a
A
full
grocery
service grocery
store.
store.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. People who live outside of Los Angeles a lot of times will assume that the whole city is Santa Monica Beach, is Hollywood, is what they see on television. And, you'll see some other iterations. Like now we've had, a little bit of a glorification of like South LA and Watts and Compton because of, rap artists and things of that nature. So people do understand that there is a different layer or a different demographic that lives in different neighborhoods throughout Los Angeles. The same is true throughout East Los Angeles. I particularly grew up in Southeast Los Angeles. So when my dad was dealing with cancer the first time, I cleaned out their pantry. And I was like, we're going to go to the farmer's market and we're going to go to a health food store and we're going to restock everything really consciously and think about the type of food that we're bringing into the household. And we had to drive miles outside of Southgate to find that food. It wasn't in our neighborhood. And thankfully, we had the means to, drive there and bring our stuff in. There's people without cars, there's people on public transit. There's so many reasons why somebody can't do that. And now I'm proud to say that my mom lives super close to a Sprouts. They opened up a Sprouts in Cudahy, which is now her go-to. So we're definitely seeing a change in the neighborhood with where more access is available. And obviously people are able to purchase at those locations that it just wasn't accessible before.
And real quick, sorry to interrupt you, but to this exact point, right? I just read a story, maybe you know more about it. Like in the last couple of weeks, it just seemed like, wasn't it Vallarta Markets opened up a new store in somewhere in South LA, like in a
Yeah.
neighborhood that previously had been what do they call it? A food desert. Like literally there was no and it was fascinating to me because I saw council person Marquise Dawson talking about it, and then just watching his video, I thought to myself, like, wow, this is a predominantly African American
Hmm.
neighborhood,
Hmm.
and like I don't know the whole Vallarta story. I know much more about like Northgate markets, but like basically this is like a Spanish speaking or a Mexican grocery chain that is opening itself up in this neighborhood to serve these people, where like
Yeah.
no other grocery chains would open up in that neighborhood, and that's crazy to me.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely grocery stores making that investment rather than seeing it as a risk, really thinking about how do we create an opportunity here and make sure that we're in communication with the existing community and what the needs are. And if you go about it that way, the experience could likely be a very robust and positive experience. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that It's a charity case. We're coming in because there's nothing else. There's business to be made.
Yeah, that's the part the businessman in me never understands, right? Like
Yeah,
I can't fathom the model, and maybe it's just my naivete. I don't understand the industry metrics and how they measure all these things, but like I can't fathom a model that says to you, if you were operating a grocery chain, right, that, oh, here's a dense neighborhood where lots of people live that has been here
hmm
forever, and there are no grocery, so there's literally no competition there. I
yeah,
don't understand the metrics behind a measurement that would tell them that, like, no, we shouldn't go there. Like, what, like, who wouldn't say, well, wait a minute, if we're the only grocery store to service this community, I mean, and hey, we could do a different size footprint store. We could design it to, like, we have all that flexibility. Like, we could do whatever we want. We own it. Like, but they
yeah.
would look at that and they would still say, no, 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 too risky. We're not going to go
Well,
there.
I think that one important piece of information that I think people are starting to understand is when people think of Latinos specifically, they tend to think, oh, this is a immigrant community. They don't have money or resources to be able to spend. But for example, I'm the kid of immigrants, right? I was born here. I was able to go to college here. I have a discretionary income that's much different than my parents was. And I am a Latina, and they're just not thinking about me
Right.
in that scenario. They're thinking about my parents, and
But
now my
but
parents are in
even
it.
right,
Yeah,
even in that, like, I mean, your parents were the parents, like they were the people
yeah,
that were the earnest, hardworking people who had multiple jobs, I'm going to presume, right? To create a better life for you, which meant that like they were literally earners in the
hmm
community. I mean, don't get me started on like we know immigrants of all sorts pay more in taxes than the billionaires do currently, right? So
exactly.
so like I mean, so like like they have multiple jobs, they're working all the time, and they have big families that they want to support and love by using food as the love language. Like, what about that says no, no, no? I don't want to be the only grocery store in that neighborhood. Like, I don't understand it,
And then once the others see how successful it is, they'll come in.
right?
They'll come in
Of
right
course they
after.
will.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean
That's always the way it
yeah,
goes.
no, it's fascinating. I mean, and there's so much of the country's history and the racism that's rooted in this conversation that could be a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
But just that in and of itself is a fascinating. So we are in the midst of this shift. We it is critical to create not just access to food in general, like reliable food sources, but then a layer above that, like healthier food options,
hmm
right? And
Yeah.
we are in the midst of this. Maybe it's a generational shift, maybe it's a cultural shift, maybe it's all of those things all at once. But it bodes well for the world of Los Angeles, as I always say, over the next 50 to 100 years, but it also bodes well more broadly for the country, it seems.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I'm
and
excited
hopefully,
for what's to come.
yeah, no, I am, and people always say like, how can you be optimistic? I'm like, I'm a pragmatic optimist, right?
Yeah.
I'm very aware, I'm very aware of the conditions on the ground around me currently, but I'm also leaning into the fact that inevitably, inexorably almost, we do, even when we backslide like we're currently doing, like we do seem to then make it up and like leap forward
Bounce forward.
as a human, as a human race. And I just ultimately believe that my grandson Leo's life in Los Angeles and the United States will be infinitely better than yours and mine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if it's off to a rough start before he knows what's going on, right?
Yeah, there's a Mexican song that's always talking about, or it talks about how la vida es un columpio. It's a life is a swing, just goes up, back and forth, back and forth. So
All right, so
yeah,
great segue. Let's talk about Mexican food. Let's talk about Todo Verde. I kind of want to know, like, how did all of this academics, civic engagement, community advocacy, your own cultural history inside your family, like the transformation inside your own personal family, like how did all of this lead you to launch Todo Verde? And then I would like you to, I'll follow on with some little businessy questions. Like then I want you to kind of give us the commercial for Todo Verde and like tell us all about the business. But first, like, how did you go from who you are and were to I think I'm gonna become
yeah.
a consumer packaged goods food company brand founder creator?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely an evolution. When I was in higher education, I had started to deal with some health issues, and I really looked at food as medicine and my own personal healing journey. And I learned more about Ayurveda and yoga, and really started to go down this path where I was trying to align those teachings to the way that I was brought up in terms of the cultural styles of food. So I was practicing making these recipes. I was practicing with my family, and most of the time things were good. Sometimes they weren't great, but at some point I remember my dad was like, "Mija, this is your thing. This is your calling. I feel like you really want to do something in food, and I'm not sure what that is. Maybe you need to open a restaurant one day." So it just kind of planted a seed, and I started kind of brewing on like, what would a business look like for me? What could I do? And so I saved it for a year. I wrote a business plan, and I initially started Todo Verde as a really small food service business. I was making superfood smoothies and agua fresca at local farmers markets. And I was
Okay.
buying the produce from the farmers at the market. And I knew that at some point I wanted to have a restaurant. I didn't think as far out as a cookbook or a product line or anything like that. Um, but it eventually evolved to that over time. But it's always been with this foundation of trying to create um, not just something that supports people who are trying to eat like more healthy plant-based foods, but also that feels true to culture and that really represents something bigger than food. It represents the well-being of our families. It represents kind of this opportunity for us to engage and learn with each other, which is like more of like the cooking classes, cooking demos, and now the cookbook where people are cooking the recipes at home. So it's really multi-layered, but I remember when I decided to quit my job, which was in higher education, I had, the full benefits package and everything. And I
Good job.
told, yeah, it was a good job. And I went to my parents and I said, "Hey, I'm going to leave this job and I'm going to start my own business." And my dad, mind you, had been an entrepreneur for the majority of his adult life. Um, and so, he was a little bit scared, but he would,
He knows how hard it
yeah,
is.
he knows how hard it is, but he did say, "We've prepared you well. We sent you to college. And if it doesn't work, you'll find something else. You're going to be fine. You'll
I love
land
the
on your feet
encouragement.
wherever you are."
It's a good girl
And
dad right there.
yeah. And my mom, on the other hand, was having a really hard time. It probably took her about a year to fully accept and embrace it. But she was very skeptical at the beginning. Now she's my number one supporter.
I love it.
Um, but yeah, it was definitely a little bit of like up and down trying to convince them and make sure that I'm making the right decision. And I feel
Uh,
like it has been the great decision. It's something that I'm really passionate about and that other people really resonate with. So it makes me feel like I'm living within my purpose where I didn't fully feel that before. So it's such a privilege to be able to find something where you're living your passion day in, day out, even on the days where it's tough and you're not doing all the things you would want to be doing. Like maybe it's more admin days.
right.
But at the end of the day, I feel really privileged and lucky to be able to do what I do and to see people's reactions to the food and the recipes and the products and all of the things that I've been able to do to see the joy that it brings them and the satisfaction is so awesome.
That's incredible. Let's talk about there's a whole bunch of things again that you're doing. Classes, books, all these different things, but
Yeah.
let's hone in on the product. So
Yeah.
let's talk to us about the product. So give us kind of so Todo Verde is the spice products. Where can we find them? What's it been like? Give me some milestones from like that day when you thought of that to now, like, oh my gosh, it's at Erewhon or it's at Sprouts or wherever they
Mhm.
are around. Maybe they're not at Erewhon. I don't know. But
They
right, but
are.
like they are.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Right. So like give us some of the business milestone markers.
Yeah, well, I mean, it really stemmed out of my cookbook launch. I saw so many people cooking the taco recipes from my cookbook, so it made me want to create a product that made sense in that scenario. That was even more flavorful than the recipes in my cookbook because they have more ingredients. And I also saw that gap in the market. I walked down grocery store aisles. I literally see generic spicy mild taco seasoning. And I was like, what the heck is this? Like, what's in it?
You're like
Generic
basically this is
chili
just
powder.
you're
Yeah.
like this is just salt or pepper. What are
Yeah.
we doing
Salt,
here?
pepper, garlic, chili
Right.
powder. Like, it doesn't say what kind of chiles or anything like that. So I was like, okay, there's definitely space for improvement here. And I feel like I could be that. I could be that. I'm known for tacos. And because I'm cooking plant-based, I'm bringing so much more flavor to the forefront because I'm cooking on tofu cauliflower. Like I need it to be better. And so that really sparked something. I work with the food scientists to be able to formulate them to get to a point where they have all these umami ingredients like red miso, black garlic, porcini mushroom, nutritional yeast, tangerine oil, like things that, and also like the specific chiles that go in each one of the recipes. Right now they're in about 250 grocery stores nationwide. I work with KeHE. I'm in Erewhon, like you mentioned. Bristol Farms was my first key account. That was a huge milestone. At that Expo West that I met you at, I connected with Bristol Farms and they brought me on. So that's been a huge learning experience. They've been such a great partnership. And I recently got the green light for Sprouts. So we're working on the back end of all of that. So I'll be launching Sprouts California later this year, which is great. And just trying to plug away at all the, all those like natural spaces because my
Yeah.
product really fits into those like sort of just natural grocers where people are looking for that type of product.
And I've learned this, again, Business Junkie meets me as the consumer. Like some of these or a handful of these grocery brands, either regionally or nationally, are owned by the same companies. I mean, like I know we just famously escaped like the
The
ultimate merger.
Kroger,
Yeah, like
Albertsons
it was
merger.
like we're
Yeah.
just gonna have one grocery store left in the
Yeah.
world, right? Like every other industry. But more on a localized level, I walk a lot. I walk and I walk often between my neighborhood and Hollywood and then over towards where my daughter and they live in Los Feliz, and I'll walk through like East Hollywood. And on Franklin, there's a Lazy Acres market,
Yeah.
which is
Mhm.
kind of cool, and it's like kind of very pseudo upscale, but it also doesn't seem like it's as pricey as like total upscale. But
Mhm.
it has that vibe where I think to myself like, oh, this would be a place that like I always think of you and Todo Verde, or I think of like my friend Geffen and Cup of Coffee, right? And I always think like,
Yeah.
oh, this would be the type of market. And then I went and did some research in Lazy Acres and maybe Bristol
Bristol
Farms.
Farms.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's like a handful of these like that are all owned by the same like conglomerates.
Bristol Farms owns Lazy Acres.
Okay. And so
Yeah.
they just
And that's
create
a
like
great,
these kind of
yeah.
regionalized neighborhoodish sub brands. And then that gives you potential access, but just because you're in one doesn't mean you're in the other.
Yeah, exactly. So
Interesting.
I'm currently in that Franklin location of Lazy
Oh, you
Acres.
are? Okay.
And I was actually teaching cooking classes they have a kitchen where they teach community-based cooking classes. So I did several cooking classes there
Oh,
as
nice.
well.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
It's
So
a beautiful store. And just for those that listen, know my walk around, it's like that's one of the spots where sometimes at night that'll be like my halfway point. So like
oh yeah.
I'll walk to there from my house, stop, get like an iced tea or something from that beautiful section of food that's right inside the entrance. And then I'll sit out on that little patio that they have and then relax and then walk back.
Yeah.
Right. So no,
That's a good
it's a
walk.
lovely,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lovely
Yeah.
story. And then my daughter and her fiance will come over from there on more like the east side of the park to almost towards the 5 side of Griffith Park, and on Los Feliz Boulevard. But they have found that there are some items, like some meats, some produce that they like at that place better
Mhm.
than the Gelson's that's in their neighborhood that's closer, or the Albertsons that's on in Los Feliz,
Yeah.
the
See, and
famous
I love
Albertsons.
those grocery stores because they're so much more thoughtful in the types of produce that they bring in. It's a
Yeah.
lot more curated. It feels more fresh. Lots of organic options available. So I personally love those types of grocery stores, and those are the types of grocery stores that I want to partner more with.
Yeah. We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Plaintext Capital. You know, investing in Web3 and cryptocurrencies isn't about jumping on the latest trends. It's about understanding where the market is headed and why. Plaintext Capital is a digital asset investment firm focused on long-term strategies backed by deep research, backing the best Web3 companies and protocols, and investing in the newest asset classes of the future. They believe that Web3 crypto will drive digital innovation for decades to come, creating significant value for investors. In fact, their team of highly skilled professionals work with institutions and serious individual investors who want clarity in a space full of hype and noise. So if you're looking to cut through the chaos and invest with purpose, Plaintext Capital brings a disciplined, high conviction approach to investing. You can learn more and meet the team at plaintextcapital.com. All right, so I have a question because you're such a fascinating, rich person with so many different aspects and nuances to you that the storyteller in me is curious about something, right? Because you talk about the food and the way it's so connective, and what I really now understand about you that I didn't before we got on this call is like how deeply centered people are and everything that you do, right? And that now helps me understand and unlock a lot more of you. But now I'm curious, like, because I'm picturing this particular Lazy Acres market, and I'm guessing where that kitchen is, if I'm guessing the right one. And so I can kind of see like a group of people, like on a Saturday morning or something, taking a class from you. How have you attached like the blends that you make and Mexican culture and like who you are and food? How do you like use that as a storytelling mechanism or tool? Right, because when you're up there, you're not just cooking, right? I mean, because that's I could cook,
Yeah.
I could teach you how to like put the ingredient in, turn the heat up. Like that's just like you're engaging with people. Like so it must all and you're an author. Like this is all emanating from a cookbook, from a recipe book that you wrote, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it seems like storytelling is ingrained in the product. Like that when someone is picking a Todo Verde spice package off the rack at Bristol Farms versus this one that's right next to it, which also is Todo Verde, but like a different flavor composition. There, it feels to me like there's a story you're telling through each of those. Is that just me injecting myself into your products, or are you actually kind of saying like, oh, when I make this blend, I'm thinking of you engaging with your family in this way, or
I mean, that's very good commentary to think about. I'm actually doing like a slight rebranding right now. I'm like in the very early stages. So I want to include more of like my story and just think about like the storytelling component generally for each one of the products, which I feel like isn't there enough. On the website, I do talk about the history and the origins of each one of those flavor profiles and kind of that like the regional element of it. There isn't a lot of real estate on the packet itself to do that currently, but I feel like I need to make that happen. Like people need to understand what Tinga is, right?
because
Like
to
it's the
me
flavor.
that's a
Yeah,
huge part of the differentiation, right? I mean, if
exactly.
and
Yeah.
now we'll go back to your original example, right? So in that aisle of 1,000 different types of Italian sauce, right? If those brands are telling their family history story or the origin of the tomatoes that they use or the history of the sauce and the relationship to the
Mhm.
part of Italy that it came from, all of a sudden, right? It's more differentiated and
Exactly.
it's giving you and I an excuse as consumers to say like, maybe I'll pick that one.
Yeah, exactly. Like I have a little bit more context around it. Because,
Yeah.
like I was saying with the Thinga, like people will try it when I'm doing in-store sampling and they're blown away by that flavor profile, yet they had never heard of Thinga. So if I wasn't there to literally have them taste it, I just wouldn't ever get that same reaction. So I'm trying to figure out what does that need to look like in terms of packaging to get people excited about it so that they actually give it a try. But I mean, I feel like the storytelling component is definitely a big piece of the cooking classes and demos and things of that nature. Because you're there in, live with these folks who are learning a new technique or a new recipe. But with the packaging, it's a lot harder to portray that on shelf. It's literally a little packet of something that's just
Yeah.
sitting on a shelf waiting for somebody to pick it up and hopefully like read it and give it the time of day to understand it fully.
Yeah. No, it is.
Um, so
Very
yeah,
different than if it were like a restaurant experience, right? Where then you can craft a
yeah,
whole reason to come, right? And then
exactly.
an experience and stepping into the story when you arrive. But
Hmm.
yeah, no, because I feel it. Honestly, I would be fascinated now that I know you more, just to sit and watch you do one of these cooking demonstrations or classes. Like
Yeah,
just to watch how you do what you do with other people, right? Because
yeah.
I would imagine it must just be very, very connective and very human. That's just my impression. All right. So little bit of a shift here. Plant-based eating. I feel like obviously we all know it's healthier for us, right? I just think even the people who say like, that's nonsense, I hate it, I think it's a terrible idea, they know, right? Like they know that it would be so like, and I always say, again, preordained, as we said at the beginning of the show, I'm not a foodie. I'm very utilitarian about food. I'm probably the worst person to comment on this, but I have said when my daughter tries to make something and then just says like, here, eat this. Right. And it's plant-based ingredients as opposed to the alternative would have been. And I'm like, wow. And I've always kind of said this super generic statement, like if it tastes good, I literally don't care. Right. And so
Yeah.
when we've had this recent wave of, although ironically, I think what I'm about to use as an example is probably just a processed version of plant-based food, but like the wave of like, non-meat burgers and non-meat meat and all those
Yeah.
types of things, like, hey, like I have enjoyed some or many of those different products at different periods. And I'm like, as long as they taste good, I'm cool. Like, I'm not like a bigoted around, I have meats, like, in fact, I'm quite the opposite. I'm enlightened and educated enough to understand the implications societally, environmentally, et cetera, related to how we produce and consume meat in this world. And so, but like, I feel like, and this is what I'm getting at, there's a question in here, right? Like, what needs to shift, or how far away are we from plant-based foods, plant-based eating being more mainstream, being more accessible, and frankly, just accepted?
Yeah. I mean, earlier we talked about the columpio, right? The swing. I feel like the the fake meats were a swing forward and then a big swing back. And I think that it caused people to look at plant-based food as not real food or also highly processed, unhealthy foods. And they're not wrong, right? But like when I talk about plant-based foods, even for me personally, like I recently dealt with a health challenge and it was, and my dog's gonna bark like crazy right now because
That's
I'm,
okay.
yeah,
We
yeah,
love dogs.
yeah. Ugh. Um, as I was dealing with the health challenge, I realized that I actually have a sensitivity to gluten and to soy.
Okay.
So, I was eating those things way too much last year, and it actually ended up backfiring on me. They're what people would assume to be like not heavily processed foods, but nonetheless still processed. So for me, that's also changed up the way that I look at foods, even though I was not consuming the fake meats and all these other processed foods on a regular basis. So now it's really for me trying to go back to like, what do whole foods look like? Just eating the beans and the grains and the fruits and vegetables and like the food in its very true, real form. And still making that taste very good and still feel like you're eating the foods that you grew up eating that feel
I
kind of
like,
nurturing.
and it doesn't seem, again, I get it, like, right, where it's like fighting big oil or something, right? We're fighting
Yeah.
against the corporate industrial complex that is food marketing. But I also feel like maybe the sliver of good news in your comments there is that fundamentally, like those whole foods, like
Hmm.
the baseline foods, if you have a grocery store in your neighborhood, all those things said, like, are accessible, like they're out there.
Hmm.
Interestingly, maybe I'm completely wrong, but like aside from like a hyper weird, super bougie, fancy farmers market where they're overpriced because of the market dynamics, but like in general terms, like whole foods, or what most people would just consider to be like ingredients in the other things they make, aren't are cheap, or are
Yeah,
right. I mean,
absolutely.
like you don't think that when you're not buying them, and then you start buying them, and you're like, oh, it turns out like if I just buy these ingredients and make this stuff at home,
Yeah.
like I just saved a whole bunch of money versus going out to the restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. In the last 6 months, especially, have been just really taking a step back from a lot of the processed foods and just focusing on my CSA box of like fruits and vegetables. I actually get Misfits Market or Imperfect Produce. And then I go to my local refill store and I refill on some of the other essentials that I would need. And it's like trying to take a step back from all the packaged stuff and just focus on like just the bare bones. Like
Yeah.
I could survive off of this and I could still make really delicious, nutrient dense food without having to, buy the things that in the past I would have, easily stocked up on.
Yeah. I love that. And also what a great takeaway for folks. All right, one last question before we get to our closing segment. Again, we've touched on all the way back from your education days, right, where you were teaching people about civic engagement. I now know why your husband is obviously as actively engaged as he is in the community because he married you, right? So he had to. I don't know what he was like before, but he clearly had to up it. He had to up his game. He had to up his civic engagement game to hang with you, right? And
It's
so
almost the opposite.
okay,
Yeah.
all right, okay. We don't want to give him too much credit.
Yeah.
You're the guest, not him, right? So,
Yeah.
but no, that's all that you guys are. For those that don't know, you're like the power couple of advocacy here in town, which I love. Both
Thank
very,
you.
very, very strong advocates of so many different things that are very important fundamentally to the community that we live in. All right, so in that vein, and kind of the broadest sense of an answer, what kind of a legacy are you hoping to plant? Not just in food, but in people's lives, whether you want to think about this here in our community or whether you want to just think about it in general terms of humanity.
I mean, I don't know if I'll like reach that level of impact where it's like general humanity, but in our community, I we're not planning to have children, but I still think about like what it means to be a good ancestor. And it, because of my cookbook, for example, like I have become a part of people's daily lives. Like they'll reach out, oh, I make this recipe on a regular basis. It's like now part of their family traditions. And so, how do I continue to provide that and create space for people who are trying to like build a healthier future for their families? So I think about, yeah, how do I be a good ancestor in the service that I'm here to provide, but then also in the way that I live, that I impact the earth? Am I eating the right ways? Am I composting the right ways? Am I gardening the right things? Am I, you know, doing the things that will leave as small of a negative footprint as possible in this life that I've created? Um, so I think, yeah, I think it's that being a good ancestor.
Again, validating completely one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show to have this conversation, right? Because you are the walking testament to my mom's encouragement that we all try to leave the world a little bit better than we found it.
Hmm.
Right. So that's where that
Yeah.
statement, that's where that in my opening statement comes from, is my mom's imploration of all of us over the years when we were kids. Like, leave every room a little bit better than you found it. Leave that interaction with your
Yeah.
friend or that person a little bit better than you found it. Like, clean up after yourself, right? Like, all just the
It's
basics.
simple. It's so
Yeah.
simple, but we make it more complex
No,
than it should be.
I love that
Yeah.
you have a purity in that purpose. That's incredible. Last question, and this is, I think, based on everything you were just talking about in this last segment of the show, I think this is the easiest layup to just like give back to all of our listeners. Give us a couple of ways, so maybe one or two or three simple ways that our listeners and our audience can start to make their meals at home more plant forward without losing that like cultural identity or flavor that they love.
Yeah, I mean, I always mention to folks to start off with recipes that you're already super familiar with. So if you have a family recipe you've been making for a long time, you know how to make it without looking at the recipe, it's just a part of your regular routine. Just see what easy things you can swap out to make it more plant-based, even if it's not fully plant-based. Like, oh, instead of the chicken, can I add in mushrooms or can I swap something and just start there? And because you already are so familiar with the flavor profile, you'll be able to kind of fine tune it from there. And then the other tip is always about building flavor. So when you're eating with plant-based foods, you're not building the same type of flavor that you would build if you were using animal products. So I really lean on umami ingredients, like I'll caramelize onion and I will confit garlic and will do all these extra things like pickle this or do that so that you're not just having that raw ingredient in there that could be a bit flat. You're adding another layer of depth and complexity. Like even for the mushrooms that you would add into a soup or stew or something like that, saute them, season them, make them taste really delicious. You're going to lose that crispy searedness. That's fine if it's going to, go into like a wet application, but you're still braising in the ways that you would braise like a meat before it goes into, or you add liquid to it. So you want to always build flavor wherever possible.
It's really cool and simple,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I mean, that's just it. I think I feel like so much of it is me hyping you up, advocating for you again, right? Is I just feel like so much of it is simpler than we think,
Hmm.
It's maybe less expensive than we think. It's more
Yeah.
accessible than we think. And the end product results can be more familiar than we think.
Hmm.
And if we would just get out of what we think and we would just try to experience some of these things and do some of this and buy some of these products and live and consume food in some of these ways, we might just find out that our ability to eat and live healthier was like always right there.
Yeah. And
It
we
wasn't,
tried to, we
yeah,
were looking for more and better and tastier and easier and this and that. Um, and yeah, those things do exist, but they're not always the best ways or not super sustainable. So yeah, it's just trying to figure out what you can do with what you've got and how you can be really creative with that. And I mean, I'm a chef, so that's what fascinates me. Not everyone is a chef. So I do get that not everyone is as passionate about it, but at the end of the day, we all have to eat. We all have to eat. And you want to eat good food. You want it to taste good. You want to crave it. You want to feel like you can serve it to others and that they'll enjoy it. So it is kind of making that little bit of extra effort to create something that could be really special and how you show love to the people around you.
amazing. What a great finishing statement. Thank you so much. This was such a joy.
Yeah. Thank you.
It
This
really
is great.
was. Yeah, it really was fun. I've learned some things. I had some suspicions confirmed. I learned a couple of new things, and I learned, most importantly to me, selfishly, because I'm the host and this is my show, is I learned a lot more about you, and what makes you tick and what makes you think about the things that you're passionate about, the way that you do. Which that in and of itself is a lesson for other people. Is just to think about how you find your way through life and purposefully, no matter what it is you're doing, right? Because
Yeah.
that's my whole thesis behind this version of this show is this the idea that I am a firm believer now, and I've now got episode after episode after episode giving evidence to the fact that there is a thread of what I'm calling entrepreneurial thinking. Maybe people would have in the past called it innovation or different, all these different things. I'm just trying to synthesize it down to like a simple phrase that we can all remember,
Hmm.
that we can all apply, and that many of us do apply to the things we do in our own lives or the things we do in our work lives, but we just don't think about it as being that. Right. And really what you've done is you've just looked in it. You're looking at something that is every day in our lives, and you look at it maybe in an unconventional way. And then the way you apply it is you're making it super easy for the rest of us to understand how they can look at it this unconventional, simpler way as well. And then boom, maybe we wind up living healthier, longer lives, which is the end goal, right?
It is definitely.
Leave our lives better than we found them, right? So
Yeah.
that's incredible. It's a blessing. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Where can people find you, follow you, find Todo Verde? We've already talked about a couple of the stores they can find if they're here in Southern California. But how can people connect with you or the brand or the book or the classes online, etc.?
Yeah, the best way is to follow us on Instagram if you're on that platform. Our handle is at Todo Verde. And if you want to sign up for our newsletter, maybe you're not on Instagram or you want to get kind of behind the scenes details of what's coming up, you can go to todoverde.org and sign up for our newsletter.
Terrific. Awesome. And I encourage everybody to do exactly that. Thank you so much, Jocelyn. It was great.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Rob.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. We can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, like, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.